So then, we are back with more understanding from the time of the Second Tabernacle services, where we find in the Aramaic English translation of the word. This translation comes from the original manuscripts of the prophets of the Israelic lineage, so then we can understand the time of the end, as per Yeshayahu the prophet. We find then layers of understanding of the spring feast, the autumn feast, and also the returning of the cities of the Messiah laid waste for many centuries, as it was spoken of by Yeshayahu the prophet, the 61st chapter, and also chapter 1:8, regarding then the returning of the holy cities, and the first city must be on the land of Cush, as per the instructions of the prophet. You find then Revelation, the 7 cities of Asia Minor must be also rebuilt, so then the vengeance can then later be served. At this time then we are evaluating then the actual news, and you find then many areas regarding war and combat, and unfortunately in Iraq there is a situation going on nowadays. The United States is trying again, becoming then the very nation involving themselves with someone else's war. Obviously, there is a reason why there is this huge change in Islamic world, because we are during the time where then Ezekiel the 37th chapter must be restored. Not only restored because Ishmael started and he was a king during his time, but also during this time where the nations are then leaving the 1,000 years of deceit, lies, and cheaters behind. Then we find ourselves asking why then the Islamic world is changing so much. It's because they must be reintegrated back to where they were at. That's why then the Islamic world is then making huge changes, and should be even more so, until what then Prophet Yeshayahu has said regarding then the trade spoken of in the 23rd chapter, and then linking up with Syria, Libya, and those nations, Iran, Iraq, those regions that were very popular during the time of the great trades, and those must return. China is then leading at the moment, as you find in the 11th chapter of Daniel. You find then, unfortunately, the translator in many of the translations then made a mistake of involving nations of the 11th chapter of Daniel, where then they should have only placed what the Hebrew word stated it. It is a region, not the actual country of the region. The 11th chapter of Daniel, you find in the kingdom of the north, kingdom of the east, the kingdom of the south. These are the big players of the time of the restoration period regarding then the Gentiles. As then the base of the statue, as Daniel the 2nd chapter was explained previously. But then Daniel went further, because after the legs of iron, the base of the statue was a mixture of iron and clay. Very interestingly, the base of the statue has some sort of iron composition mixed with the clay. So there is a continuation of this fourth kingdom as it was stated in the 11th chapter of Daniel. We read the 2nd chapter, legs of iron being Rome, and then later on, Rome was then destroyed, and then had some remnants of the culture and the lineage of these nations. But not only this, the most important players are then China, the Soviet Union, and Africa. Those are the main players. And amongst themselves then you find many events taking place, and then the relationship with these countries, and then the beast. Then we have to read chapter in Revelation regarding then the first and second beasts. We read in the 11th verse, you find, and I saw, there was obviously Yohanan, another beast of prey that came out of the earth, and he had a couple of horns like those of a lamb, and he spoke like the destroyer. This country is United States. The first beast, as it was then explained, as far as the Gentile level, as we can understand, then is Great Britain, because it was then the 800 years, and then a couple of hundred years makes then the 1,000 years of deceit. Does not mean Great Britain and the United States were deceitful. Simply means outside of tabernacling, then the beast was then active through these. And then we have to understand also Daniel the 11th chapter. As it was explained before, you find in the relationship of the kingdom of the north, east, and south, then you find the Gentile Netzer. You find then the socialist groups then uniting themselves once again on behalf of the protection of the new trade. The 1,000 years of deceit obviously is, the more we study, the more we understand, is fading away. And then the new system must start. However, United States is then trying once again, re-establishing itself, trying once again, becoming the savior of the world. And what can we understand of this nation then? As it was explained, they have then a form of God, like this lamb, like horns, like lamb, but they speak like a destroyer. Let's then stop for a moment and understand what it means then regarding then the despised one. Not only the United States then is trying to help then the Iraqis, but there is a problem with this situation. We understand very precisely they also want to involve other countries and then reestablishing themselves and extending 1,000 years of deceit. It won't take place, not this time. So then, we find ourselves then studying the covenant. You find then the first section of the covenant regarding then the first tabernacle service, and then the second tabernacle services. They are under the same covenant. But let's then understand what this means, because in the 21st verse of the 11th chapter of Daniel gives you the despised one. But then, as we understand, these events are synchronized. Ezekiel, the first chapter, explains of a machine of synchronisms, of many rounds and many kinds of circles and so on and so forth. These you can understand as a machine of synchronizing of events. How can you synchronize many events on paper? You have to understand how a clock works. Old-fashioned clocks, you understand there are many kinds of instruments inside of the clock. There are many kind of round gears in each of them doing its own share. So then, as far as the covenant, you find sections of it in the 11th chapter regarding then the ruler of the covenant. You find then the first tabernacle service, representatives of this portion of the covenant already completed. Since we understand the action of these covenant of the first tabernacle service, you understand then it's the false service. The Messiah himself spoke of the situation in Michichiahu, the 24th chapter, regarding then this section, where he said then the abomination that makes desolate. Desolate simply means they are trying to re-establish a service where then truly it is an abomination. You don't sacrifice animals anymore in a temple or in a tabernacle. This area was completed. However, because of the lusts, let's then understand another layer, because this layer is going then to lead us then in the future, and then the starting of the combat of the end. Then we read a portion in Revelation. Then explains an area where then Nahashatan, or then the enemy, wilt be released for a short time and wilt seduce the nations. Let's then understand what this seduction means. There are many forms of power of this world. Power of money, power of religion. And the most important religions at this time, you find then the Islamic world, ever since the first son, Ishmael. Then you find then the Tzayelic lineage, you find tabernacling. And you find many other kinds of religion. You find Christianity, unfortunately, is a pure lie. And then these are then the lusts of this world. Since we understand United States being then a false religious country, as it was a lamb with a couple of horns, yet speaking like a destroyer, what can we understand of the Iraq war? Very simply, they are trying to take on again a control of the region. The US won't ever give up the Mideast because of the petroleum thereof. But let's then evaluate what the Arabs are involved with regarding the new system, the BRIC system. The BRIC system is it. It is the starting of the new computerized system, as Daniel the prophet had prophesied in the 12th chapter of Daniel. And then many nations shall go to and fro. However, this time was then over. People going to and fro. Portions of the nation of Israel in many kinds of countries. These are also gone. The time of deceit is gone. It's time of the restoration. And what can we understand of US trying to do? They are trying to drag other countries on doing what the lamb with the two horns is showing. The aftermath is then speaking like a dragon, or then a destroyer once again. So then, there is a high level understanding as far as the British government regarding Australia and also other countries coming together for a visit, and then talking of the situation in Iraq. They should be very circumspect and very wise in what kind of a move they are trying to do, because the hands of the Creator himself is involved with it. As we understand Ezekiel 37th chapter, there is a restoration of the first and second sticks of authority. The first is trade, the second is tabernacling. And he is uniting the first son and the second son. As far as the level of it, we don't understand very precisely how it's going to be. But we do understand that he is uniting both of them. These, however, takes a further study then of Daniel the 11th chapter regarding these covenants. But then, studying Revelation, you find then, and he shall be released for a short time to seduce the nation. What is the seduction? The Messiah himself was explaining in the 24th chapter of Michichiahu then the seduction. He was explaining the time of the abomination. What the Messiah was considering an abomination truly is a lust regarding what the other nations, as far as the evil people, want. Let's then explain this a bit more. What people want is simply have some sort of a religion. They want to live the way they want, with the sin or not, and every once in a while they want to be holy on their own eyes. This means seduction, seducing their very themselves, so then they can believe themselves as being saved while never making any changes. For instance, Israel wants to re-establish the Levitical priests as then as it was during the time of the temple. The sacrifices in the whole 9 yards. It is truly an abomination. However, on their side of the situation, they are very contented. And the United States is being involved with the Middle East as far as this war. Nobody's discarding the importance of humanitarian help. The humanitarian help is very important. Now the war and trying to drag other nations, they obviously wanting the control of the petroleum of the area, because they understand the importance of the freighters very shortly taken over. Let's read then a section regarding then the covenant. You find then the first covenant from verses 25th through the 41st. You find an area over there of the covenant, and also from the 10th through the 24th. You find then the ruler of the first covenant being active. Then you find the establishment of the vision of the second tabernacle services. So then you find these forces then linking up with each other, but never under the same understanding. Not only this, you find then the despised one being involved in the midst of them. What can we conclude of this situation? As far as other nations being involved in Iraq at this moment is extremely unwise. Having soldiers over there in the nation is extremely unwise. And try to remind ourselves that we are during this time of a transition, because what was started then by the first son must be completed. 62nd chapter of Yeshayahu explained the restoration of the stick of authority of the Ishmaelites. It explains very plainly. So they will conquer. However, nations being involved with the despised one, then they have to count their consequences, because the system is going to show itself up. There are so many Chinese virtual stores helping so many people around the world in such reasonable prices, and the US is trying to come against it at any cost. Dragon Mart is opening in Mexico, and it's going to benefit thousands upon thousands of people. So US then is trying to help other countries, but yet they use their own monetary system to enslave the rest of the world, as it was then explained in Revelation, as a lamb with horns, but then speaking like a destroyer. The more we understand the brick system and the new virtual system coming via computer, The more we give them understanding, the more we study, the more we help this system, the more people we are helping. Nations such as Iraq, Iran, in those areas, they also are going to be part of this new system. And they have petroleum in their countries so that they can be backed up. Let's then evaluate what Australia and Great Britain is going to do as far as the moves of soldiers in northern Iraq, and verify the movement of the despised one. Because this situation is sure. If they get involved in this war, they won't win. As you can understand, there is not a victory. For instance, in Afghanistan, in so many areas of the Middle East, there is not truly a victory. There is a roundabout, roundabout, and roundabout. So let's then evaluate what is awaiting us as far as the outcome of this war. As it was explained before, humanitarian help, absolutely. Sending a peace group over there, absolutely. A mediation from those Islamic groups, and then the people over there not wanting to become involved, very important. As far as taking on the war on their behalf, absolutely not. And then bringing those murders into justice. Or is the policy of the U.S. is then to use a machine gun on them and not giving them a chance for justice? Such as was Saddam, such as the leader of Libya. Those people did not have a chance of going to justice. So then let's evaluate these more the next time, and then study the covenant, the first and second covenants, as we understand as one, but make it easier so we understand the abomination that makes desolate. Then we understand the first and second, but there is only a covenant, the completion of the first, so the second is established, and it was established, and then it is going to be restored. So then please stay tuned, much more coming up.